Okay, thanks guys for your patience. I guess we'll just take it from the top. As you can see, the usual, and thank you so much guys. I really appreciate you. Okay, so here's the ICC homepage with the news. As I mentioned earlier, Chess Life this month has a picture of Neopomniachtchi on the cover. Very good article and coverage there. If you remember, we did a preview of the match a few shows ago. Another very good article inside the Chess Life is Grandmaster Moradabi, who came to us to play at Texas Tech for a few years and is a really classy guy. Okay? I think he won the US Grand Prix a few years ago. Anyway, good stuff in Chess Life this month. Now, for our show tonight, we're going to take a look at some of my recent rook in-games. Okay? 2 weeks ago, we looked at in-games from my youth. Okay? I was surprised how many of them were with black. But that makes sense. With black, you have to neutralize that white initiative, try to survive to an in-game, pocket a little pawn or two along the way, and then hopefully convert it. So, what we're going to look at tonight is over the last few years, a couple of our more recent in-games. Let's see. So, one of the features I mentioned before that I like here is if we go to View, My Profile, and then we have Games. Okay, under the Games section, you're allowed to store up to 400 of your favorite games or positions. Okay, so pretty much everything from all the previous presentations has been stored. And now we're going to start with this in-game a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, from the Florida State Championship. T Big Mag says to heck with equalizing, he goes straight for the win. Yeah, in fact, I think T Mag could just, before White even makes his move, I think you could just pre-move 1 F5, get the party started. Okay, so in this position, one of us had offered to draw a few moves earlier, and the other one didn't hear it. That's what happens when you got two old guys playing. So, but here playing white, I offered a trade of bishops, and I felt like I'm semi-forcing a favorable double rook in game, because if he lets me trade on d5, he's going to wind up with an isolated pawn. Good chances to just lose the pawn. Now, why did I think it was favorable? Well, I felt I had the 3-2 queenside majority. After the relatively obligated trade, I have the rook on the open file, and my king is closer to the queen side to help try and support said pawn majority. Now again, small incremental advantages, and even the rook on the 4th rank, as we will see, has some prospects. So again, small incremental but not insignificant advantages. Let's see how it plays out. King over, rook to the 6th. Well, the obvious thing would be rook to the 7th, but rook to the 6th, that's where the pawns are. He goes king up, and now rook over here to b6. He plays rook up. He could have played rook at c to b8 to try and trade rooks. So now I go ahead and chip away at his queenside pawns with a4. And you can see now the rook on b6, the rook on e4, they're pretty ideally placed. So once he plays rook up, then we go take, 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 and rook over. So on the last several moves, what have we done? Well, this is fantastic now. We've secured a connected passed c4 pawn, which basically means probably most king pawn in games are pretty much won. So let's see. He plays king up. Now he does activate his king, and he is going to get his center pawns going. Because look, if I've got a queenside majority, that means he's got a kingside majority. But this check is a nice little reminder, because now when his king comes forward, then we can start trying to cramp his pawns on this side. And here, this is a very nice touch, because he's too slow with e4, and we're forcing him to push the f-pawn in order to save it. But now we've kind of stopped his forward progress, because if he plays e4, I can seriously consider playing rook takes f4. Time to improve our king. He restrains my
Check.
queenside pawns, check, and rook over should win a pawn. But as usual, there's always that ugly counterplay. Tibmag is saying that he missed something when I said white's queenside pawn majority is more important than black's kingside majority. Well, I don't remember exactly at which point I said that, but maybe I was talking about like right here. Because with the 3-2, it's easier for me to make a passed pawn and an outside passed pawn, plus my king is closer to support it. Whereas his potential is to make a passed e-pawn, which is much easier to stop in the center of the board. I think that's kind of where I was thinking. So now, though, he has a tactical problem because the pawn on e5. He plays king over. I play rook takes.
Check.
He checks, but now I can connect the dots and interpose. So, of course, if he trades rooks, my pawn is very strong. He doesn't have time to run down and grab the b2 pawn. But this is his idea. He wants to sneak in rook to e3 check. So, quite often the case in this type of advantage, white's now got a pawn, but black's got counterplay. He's going to play rook e3 check and rook takes f3. The question is, how are you going to deal with it? But, as I was going to say, quite often in these type of endgames, you can trade one kind of advantage for another, for another, for another, and you just keep rolling the advantage. And so here,
check.
We can go ahead and send his king to the edge of the board. Now, as those of you that have seen my previous rook in-game presentations know, bad things happen to kings on the edge of the board.
Check.
And now check. That puts him further on the edge of the board.
Check.
And now we go ahead and take that pawn. But then we check and put him back on the edge of the board. Okay, now he's still going to play rook check and take the pawn on f3, but what have we done? We've isolated his king to the side of the board, and like we saw a Botvinnik example quite a while back when he had a passed c-pawn against Levenfish, we are going to use time that it's going to take for him to take the f3 pawn. We're going to use that time to mobilize and organize our forces. So first thing, the rook down. You see we've got him cut off on the b file. He's going to do his check. We're going to give him that pawn, but then we push pawn to c5. Now, no question about who's got the better coordination. Our rook does two wonderful things. First, it cuts his king off. Secondly, it keeps an eye on his promotion square. His rook, on the other hand, is in front of his pawn and has trouble getting back over to the c file. His king, well, my king can go either way. My king can go after his pawn or head upfield. His king is stuck on the a file. So, rook down. Now, for example, there, if he tried to trade rooks, we could trade, king over, kill his counterplay, and our c-pawn would roll. So now, rooks belong behind passed pawns. This forces him to check and hustle back. We have time to take this, and we'd correctly calculated that at this point right here, our king would be able to come, protect our pawn, and we're just one check away from sending him back to the a file. Yes. And now king in. Now in the game, he played rook over. We pushed.
Check.
He checked. We came up. He came over. And now the double attack on the rook in the promotion square. And I believe this is about the point where he resigned. Okay. So a good example of small cumulative advantages and transitioning one type of advantage into another. And against a good master, very experienced. He may even be older than moi. Okay, so let's see what else we got. This was against a national master, but this was, I think, an internet game. I was white. I think I had some advantage earlier. Maybe I let it disappear a bit. I played rook to the 6th. Again, not rook to the 7th, but rook to the 6th. the old mating net scenario. The threat is simply pawn to g4 check. When he plays the obligatory f6, then rook to the 7th. Rook a6 was another option, but rook to the 7th. Now he drops his king back. And here is the delicate touch.
Check.
h5 check. Put him in the box, baby. So if he takes that pawn, needless to say, rook takes on g7, and the g4 mate is on, so his king is forced back into the hole. Now we take this pawn. So now we have the very interesting 4 to 4 on the king side with our rook in front of our passed a pawn. Well, I knew for a fact that this endgame is winning. Why did I know this? Because Yasser Seirawan won this endgame with picture-perfect technique, showed us how to do it against Lajos Portish. And what would be the technique? You can put your rook all the way on the 8th, run your pawn all the way to the 7th. That will force his rook behind your pawn. Then you play the move f4, you create a passed e pawn, and at some point their king has to come out to guard against the passed e pawn, and then either you get check and queen or you get check and skewer. So I knew this technique from the very nice Seirawan Portish game. So let's see what happened in this game. He played rook over, but of course king up, rook over. We start advancing the pawn. That's going to keep his rook tied down. Now we start to create a passed e pawn, take, push, king in, push, rook back. And now this, of course, is very easy because we already got an extra free passed pawn. So we trade that passed pawn in for this pawn on the 7th.
Check.
When he checks,
Check.
now the second pawn starts to rumble. And of course, his poor rook is sitting there fighting a losing battle against two passed pawns. King totally out of play. And so this was actually much easier than the aforementioned technique that Seirawan had to display against Portish. But again, little tricks like the mating net, like rook to d6, threatening mate. Okay, and then when he played f6, rook to d7, again threatening to take on g. And when he went back, the little h5 check. Now we got his king boxed in, and now we have what we knew to be a theoretically winning rook endgame. So let's see. Now here's a game, someone posted this in the ICC training bot. And so this is like wildly crazy. Black has a massive amount of passed pawns for the rook. So anyway, I think at the time I worked out the solution is something like this.
Check.
The old skewer. But now, of course, you got a rook that has to deal with all these monster pawns. So I think some calculation was required to solve this puzzle. I think Stormy is the one. He likes to do a lot of postings. And then from here, white should be able to win pretty cleanly, I think. Yeah. So, a little bit crazy position from the tactic bot. Now, here's one of my more very recent games. I think this was maybe played on Lichess. So I'm playing a guy named Retired Master. So let's see, I'm white. I have a passed c pawn. He has a passed e pawn. So queen d5, centralizing the queen, offering a trade, threatening potential back rank mate action, but also preparing to support the c pawn. He trades, and now the Tibmag's question is, for example here, why is the passed c pawn more important than the e pawn? Well, the e pawn is much easier for white to blockade, as we will see, whereas the c pawn can be turned into a connected passed pawn. So in this scenario, the white passed c pawn is more valuable than the e pawn, as we will see. Now, of course, he trades a pair of a pawns, but that does leave the b pawn weaker if I can ever get to it. Okay, but now my king comes forward and takes up a very nice blockading position. Okay, now we start to go after his pawn, and then simply rook up, and you can see we've managed to surround his pawn while keeping our base intact. In the game, he played rook over. I took this.
Check.
He took that. I took there, and started pushing the pawn. And I think about this point, we built the bridge.
Check.
And that was the point where the retired master once again went into retirement. I trust everyone can still hear the audio. Okay. And let's see. Now, about a month and a half ago. Okay, thanks, Tidmag. About a month and a half ago, I didn't have anyone here looking for games, and so went into the fishing pool. And who did I find? Grandmaster Mark Hebden, a blast from the British 1980s circuit. Challenged me. I was nothing special with white, but got to this endgame where his king is fantastically active. But you have to be careful in the endgame. Fantastically active can also be a euphemism for being in a mating net. His rook is very active. So Mark had played the game extremely well, but I found counterplay by getting my rook to the 7th and going after his e7 pawn. So here, though, I played bishop to d4. He took. And now, like a dummy, I should just play rook takes pawn check. Duh! And after king to d5, e pawn takes, and life is good. One connected passed pawn to the good. But I'd seen this position and saw that I liked this endgame, and did not follow Lasker's rule of looking for something better. So now, again, I have a slightly favorable rook endgame, and because obviously the passed d pawn is better than his 3-2 kingside majority, the b5 point, g6 point are possible attacks, and the nice thing is my rook cuts his king off on the e file. He goes rook down, I start to push. He goes over, but now I drop back, and now he's got to hustle back and play d. He gets back, push, and rook to the 6. There I did not follow the rook behind the passed pawn. I wanted to keep his king cut off on the king side. He dropped back. Now I start bringing my king in. Now I push. Now I do rook behind the pawn. He brings his king over. Now I go ahead and snip a few. So again, there you can see a good example of exchanging my advanced passed pawn for extra pawns on the king side. Okay? So now he goes for counterplay. That's the mark of good players.
Check.
But rook check and rook over to c5 was very unexpected bad news, because after takes,
Check.
I pocket both pawns. That was kind of a Publix BOGO special. Buy one, get one free. So now I've got a clear 2-pawn advantage. Should be pretty easy peasy. Here I missed a very nice technique. I played the routine, automatic, boring pawn to h3. I think the computer showed me, duh Ron, rook to h3 wins a tempo. But not what happened. I played h3, he went rook g7, and that's his point. He's attacking this guy. So again, now it's just a matter of converting. So now I start pushing that pawn, using that pawn as bait. He can't
Check.
He can't keep both pawns from advancing. He has to decide which one he's going to let go. Meanwhile, that guy's making tracks.
Check.
That guy's already on the 6. King in. And once again, what do we play here, guys? Did someone say rooks behind passed pawns? That's what I heard. Rooks behind passed pawns. Okay, so he got that guy, but he's a little late to the
Check.
party. So king over.
Check.
Check. That just drives me this way. Go ahead and get the queen. And now you can see my king is very close. Easy to deal with the f-pawn. Just simply hunt it down. or
checkmate.
administer checkmate. Okay, so a very satisfying win against a good grandmaster in the endgame. Although again, could have just played rook takes pawn on e7 check right away. Would have been a little better. Now, one last example from my eldest, most senior student, Mr. Saylor, who I believe is about 76 years old at this point. God bless him. Drives motorcycles across country. Braver man than I. And here's a recent double rook ending. He'd missed a win earlier, and now he got this double rook ending, absolutely dead equal. But there is an open H file. So let's see what happens. He tries f4, of course. Black plays c5. But I'm going to show you this game, even though it's got some mistakes, because it shows how the points and half points in the endgame can be tossed back and forth. So Saylor gets the idea to play rook h5. Now the guy plays g6. Now, just to go back a minute, like right here, f6 probably would have been a good idea for him. Just immediately get rid of that spearhead pawn. But he didn't do it, and now he doesn't get a second chance. Because now, the problem is here, he's in a little bit of a skewer / mating net. If he just brings his rook over, say to e8, well then, you double rooks. If he goes king g7, you double rooks. But then he should play rook to g8. That would be his best defense. So he should play king g7. When you double rooks, play rook to g8, then on check, then slither back, and then you can go rook back to the d file, and he can play king e8, and he's still hanging in there. Instead, he panics, and Saylor, for whatever reason, he was short on time, that's the problem. He played rook takes pawn on g6 check, and rook takes f6 check. That just simply wins. That just ends the game. But he played pawn takes pawn, didn't think it mattered, and that shows how a careless move can throw away everything.
Check.
The guy checks. When he interposes, the guy plays king up. And not only is he protecting his g6 pawn, he's recouping his pawn on f6. Absolutely dead equal. White has no way to claim an advantage. But
check.
Life goes on. King up.
Check.
Rook check. And here, as I was watching the game, I was expecting black to play rook e7, but rook e7 might be a little... No, that should be a draw. Okay? But instead, McKnights is in the house, baby! So a6. So again, this happens sometimes in endgames. Just when the guy's done all the work and you think, okay, he's about to clinch the draw now. And then he plays a move like a6, which, I mean, why not rook e7? Well, look, rook over and pawn to a4. At least fix those puppies. Who knows what'll happen next? Now the guy goes rook e6. Rook d7, fishing expedition. The guy plays g5. Good move, trading pawns. Every pawn trade gets black closer to a draw. And white? Well, white cuts off the king. Takes, takes. So at least white can argue that his king is a little better, and he sets a trap. If the rook goes down, then he can play rook check and try to take the pawn. So, black drops back. Now here there is a question of whether white can play rook e5 and gain anything from it. Instead, he plays king f5, setting another trap. Now, all black needs to do to make a draw is play rook f6 check. If king e5, then he can play rook to f2, counterattack the base, force white in some b4 liquidation, forcing the draw. Instead, at a fast time control, the player playing black played rook to e2. Coach Connor, how does that relate to chess? Aha. Okay, I guess that's a response to some ad to buy viewers. Why would I want to do that? Anyway, does anyone see the winning move? Yes. Of course, you play rook e5 check.
Check.
Takes, takes, and now you have a king and pawn endgame, but let's take a look at your advantages. One, you have the opposition. Two, you have reserve moves, b3 and c4, or as they call them, reserve tempo. Tempo. and the pawns on the queen side are fixed. But the winning technique is still very, very instructive. Okay, king over, king over. You have to do what we call turning the corner. Okay, now you use the first of your two tempi. You play pawn to c4. He goes king back. Now you go king up to e7. Now, if he goes king to c8, of course you go king d6. You repeat, you edge him out. So, he goes king to c6. And this is the part I like. I saw a British grandmaster won a fantastic king and pawn endgame like this in a Italian game years ago, where he had to walk his king into like b6 to a7 and come in from the back. And that's what this reminded me of. Here's the technique. You go king d8 and you squeeze them out. If they go king to d6, you go king c8. And if they go this way, then you come back. Now you attack the pawn. You go here. They go to a6. And voila! The killer. King to b8. Little zugzwang. If black didn't have to move here, he would not have to lose the game. But because the rules of chess compel him to make a move, once he plays b5 check, you snip that one off. He moves again. You play pawn to b3, and he has nothing more than pawn to c4, losing his second pawn. Game over. So, a very nice example of how points in endgames can be tossed back and forth, and you just have to be alert to your opportunities. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the presentation part, and we're going to open it up for some challenges. Okay, by the way, one other bit of really good news is our friends at the Las Vegas Chess Festival. I think they now have over 990 players registered. So that's pretty fantastic. Very, very happy for them. I will not be there this year, but probably will resume being one of the grandmasters on staff next year. So let's see who we have here. So I said I would play Coach Connor first.
Game started.
Well, if I play here against T-Mag, the F-pawn comes firing forward. But here, a little more traditional Ruy Lopez. B6. Wow. I didn't really calculate it, but I assume that taking the e4 pawn is dangerous because of rook e1. And usually I'm such a mild-mannered positional player, but why not go for the gold? In the words of that Danish philosopher Bent Larsen, it's not illegal to threaten mate in one. Okay, Ron, he wasn't really a philosopher. Is it illegal to threaten mate in one twice in a row? That's another question. I have a really funny idea here. Like, say he plays pawn to f5. Let's say I take the queen, do the crosstown bust to b3. He plays pawn to d5. Then I play knight takes c6, knight takes c6, queen c3, hit the knight on c6, hit the rook in the corner for the corner shot. Looks pretty tasty. Well, since we're here, give it a shot. Is it illegal to threaten mate and 1 3 times in a row in the same game? Probably not. Oh, okay, McKnights. I see. Offer our best prayers for your father in the hospice. I logged onto your channel, and I saw you gotta go. Okay. Yeah, I saw a picture of a hospice background. I didn't know what that was about. Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Totally understood, and God bless. Hope things work out. So anyway, kind of playing with house money here because we are a pawn ahead, and we could obviously play routine moves like pawn takes pawn, but this was the vision I had with a nice double attack. And it's good to see a queen that can do gymnastics, right? Okay. Yeah, let's just go ahead and chop that off. I guess at some point I need to pay a little attention to my own queenside development here. Been having so much fun with the queen gymnastics. Okay. Well, part of me wants to develop with tempo, but part of me wants to get out of town. Okay, this is getting a little more dangerous than we'd hoped, because now he's got the knight coming. I'm so far behind in development. How much am I up? A rook? My queen's a little too far in. That just feels bad. Yeah, we are woefully behind in development here. Okay. Not the ideal solution, to be sure. Starting to feel dangerous here. I am woefully behind in development. Ron, you said that. Oh, it's true then, too. But how could I resist those gymnastics? Winning the piece. Who could resist that? Starting to see gymnastics for him. Like knight to d4, pawn to b4, bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes c2, forking my queen and all my rooks. Well, we are like desperate for development. So now I'm thinking if he plays f5, I may be well served to play queen h3 check, followed by c3, just to Now, of course, bishop takes a3. I'm obviously not worried about double pawns. That's the very least of my concerns here. Okay, so here I thought that I could play queen check.
Check.
Give this guy the boot. And then if nothing bad happens to me right away, I should be able to play pawn to d4, build a wall.
Black coming forfeits on time.
Oh, I didn't even realize time was an issue. So here's one of those non-guys from before. Yeah, good game, Coach Connor. Yeah, b6 in the opening was a little bit of a miscue there, buddy. Okay, so McKnights, good luck and thanks for dropping in.
Game started.
Mm-hmm. I'll be right back. Had to let the boss in. That is my cat, pictured near the chessboard there. Now this is interesting. If you go b5, d4, it's a little bit early on the expansion. Let's go a little more restrained. It's a very tricky opening he's playing. Well, now, of course, if he plays h5, okay, so now he's offering to trade this guy. We don't necessarily have to trade that guy. We could change gears now, play pawn to d5. We could also play queen c8. Queen c8, though, I don't know if I like him playing e4. Let's change gears. Have to say he's done this very, very well. I don't have to say it, but it's true. He has done it very, very well. Now he's touching that guy. Okay, I get that. Counterplay, we hope.
Server announcement.
I mean, look, we can all see the H-pawn's probably a goner in this life. But at least if I can make a little trouble for him, grab something else. A very tricky opening he played, kind of a Jobava London, if you will. Okay, well, in that case, take what we can. And obviously we're not castling kingside with all that heat over there. No, no, no. Doesn't mean the other side's going to be a walk in the park either, but yeah, I'm still seeing some issues over here as well. Oh, I see what I'm going to have to do at some point. Okay, I'm not saying I'm thrilled with it, but I see what I got to do at some point. Now, it's a little unusual to actually move into the X-ray line here. His knight is very well placed. Not easy for me to boot him with F6. But I want to get my king to A7. I just feel like A7 is a safe place. Because earlier he had a tactic where he could go knight A4 and then try to take on B6. It would not have been easy to get rid of the knight. Now I want to get up here. And okay, so now there should be some opportunities here. Okay, time's a bit of an issue, but fortunately we seem to be a little more ahead on time. Probably don't want to let him play c5. That's too much. What happens if we play pawn takes pawn? Probably take with the queen. Let's do this. Bishop takes. Pawn takes. Another idea I had for counterplay was to ram the h-pawn. Now what happens if we go here? Just threaten to take his knight.
Check.
Well, we got to be happy with this turn of events. We got to an endgame. Watch out for rook takes and pawn takes pawn check. Let's just push this.
White coming forfeit challenge time.
Really good game, sir.
Server announcement.
Not easy at all. Not sure exactly where the tide turned. And you definitely had pressure the whole game. Okay, Najmednov.
Game started.
What to do with a guy like you? In the words of that other great philosopher, Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. That was always one of my favorites. What was the one he said about shopping malls? Something like, don't like to go there, there's too many people. Excuse me. That's a pinner. Ron with the keen eye for the obvious. See, that's what they don't tell you about all the books. Trying to become a GM. Got to spot the obvious pins. Yeah, now he plays an interesting idea there. Boy, it's tempting to play bishop takes knight on c6. I said it's tempting. I didn't say I was going to do it. Well, let's just keep it straight. Let's go here. Now, unfortunately, on knight takes knight check, bishop takes bishop check, I'd like to take with a queen. That would be the most convenient. Could even take with a king. Why not? Position could probably support it. Although, then he could undermine me. Yeah, you need to take with a queen. So therefore, probably need to take with a knight on bishop takes bishop check.
Check.
But how can this not be good because I'm a tempo ahead over a main line? Anyway, every trade's supposed to be a plus. Now, surprisingly enough, I may actually need to put that knight on e2 to guard against knight to d5. Yes, I was just thinking about that. So an interesting battle here. I have the e4 square, he's got the f4 square. I have the extra pawn, but a little loosey-goosey on the king side. Okay, there. One feels he may have pushed the envelope just a wee bit far. Do I need this? Well, he might get a big knight on e5 if I don't. Not sure. The computer would approve of bishop takes c6 and queen f3. The question is now, which way should the knight go? Which way should the king go? These are important questions.
Server announcement.
The party is complete. Our friend server announcement is here. So that's interesting. He offers a queen trade. But then when I trade, my knight's not going to have the same juicy squares it had before.
Check.
But it should be okay. I am a button ahead, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Check.
And I am in check. Once again, Ron with the keen eye for the obvious. I'm in check. Again, Russian rules. My pawns are my pawns. I want that pawn on d4, but I don't want to give you my pawn on b2. I learned that from Grandmaster
Server
Vladimir
announcement.
Tikmikov. I was analyzing with him at a tournament in Hastings, and every time I would attack his pawns, he would defend them. And then he would try to steal mine. Okay. Now under the heading of limiting counterplay, let's trade a pair of rooks, because we anticipate we're going to take this pawn on d4. Now, having taken the pawn on d4, we wanted to make sure we traded a pair of rooks first. If he hadn't played that, I would have played b4. Now the question is, should we go back and provoke him some more? We think so. Now the knight has a very nice dominant post on d4. He has no pawns left to run him away with, and it should be pretty straightforward technical process from here. Famous last words. Not sure what he's teeing up for there. Let's just get the rook to the open file, and feels like things are going well here.
Black incoming forfeits on time.
Okay, so that worked out pretty well. And unfortunately, Foxy Openings is up next.
Game started.
And what do we do with a guy like this? Same problem I had earlier. He just pushed Harry right up the board. Bam! That's really interesting because now d5, e5, knight e4 is not appetizing because knight g2. I no longer have the recipe. So that is annoying. Got to play the obligatory d6 and get a bad whatever. So notice he's playing a little more aggressively than Anon 8 did earlier. I suppose theoretically black is supposed to castle here and let white attack him. Let's see how this works theoretically. Yeah, try to blow up their center before he gets set up, camps out. By the way, Foxy Openings is an interesting handle. Foxy Openings has videos by Susan Polgar, the indefatigable Andrew Martin, Roman Jinjinhashvili, yours truly, Ron W. Henley, trying to think other grandmasters, and many, many more. And pretty much every opening you can imagine is covered. Now, somehow I was almost unhappy to see him take that way because that takes some of the dynamics out of the position. But, on the other hand, I can go chase his dark squared bishop. And hopefully this will take a lot of the pizzazz out of the h-pawn attack. Now there's a little dragon-esque tactic here, that bishop f2 to preserve the bishop. Does in fact preserve the bishop, but newsflash, bishop relocation, a la Sniper volume 161, is embarrassing.
Incoming challenge.
Tough break, dude. We got to put that one in the blender and see what the story is. But yeah, of course, bishop h6 zapped the queen. Okay,
Game
we got
started.
Nishmednov. One more time. Mr. F7 F5. And that's his new name. Mr. F7 F5. So not a lot of chat in the chat room. I guess we are all chatted out. Now with colors reversed and the knight back on b1, there's a line that goes h5, g4, knight up, h6, knight takes f7, or maybe is it bishop takes f5? Yeah. Some razzle dazzle like this. Because see, you don't have time to play h6, h3, maintain the integrity of your pawn structure. Oh, whoa. I was going to play h6, but then I realized, is f3 the move? I'll let him work it out. Yeah, now we're entering some kind of Chigorin Steinitz chess in the old days, the way it was played.
Check.
No holds barred MMA chess, baby. Oh, threatening knight d4 check. I love it. Gotta stop the mate. Very good, Ron. Get that defensive team on the field, baby. Oh, yeah. It ain't easy. It ain't easy. Now, the real Nishmednov would go queen takes f2, pawn takes c3, bishop c5 check. And he would lose 12 out of 13 games to Polygaevsky. But the one game he wins, baby, it would be incredible. It'd be a game of the ages. It's funny, no one remembers the other 12 games that Polygaevsky won. Everyone only remembers the games that poor... Well, everyone remembers the one incredible brilliancy. Which pawn will he take? Good. This is purely positional move. We want to trade the light squared bishops and have the Wunderbar knight on e4. And that is the key to our defense. Thinking about taking that pawn on g7, vacuuming, And we're taking this pawn, not to grab a pawn, but because we want that g5 square for our pieces. Where is he going with his king this game? Is he going to castle kingside? Don't know. Guard that f3 pawn. Computer later will tell us that was a wasted move. I'm missing one move here. I need one move to play queen f1 to h3 or to play c3 and queen b3. I'm just missing that one move. But fortunately that knight on g5, I'm hoping that's the guy that keeps things together for us. Dude. What was the thinking there?
Black resigns.
Maybe you meant play queen g6, I'm not sure. Okay, if you guys don't mind, we're going to call it a night. Thank everyone for playing, and look forward to seeing you guys next week. Wishing Mr. McKnights good luck with his father, who's in the hospice for day 4. And thanks to ICC for sponsoring us, and we will see you next week, same time, and have a great week until then. All the best.